Sure, Nashville 911. What is the address of your emergency?
Somebody drove off the road and hit a tree.
Are you with the vehicle?
There's two people there.
Okay.
They're pinned really bad. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I'm sending the paramedics and the police department to help you now.
Soon after this 911 call, Nashville Police Department rushed to the crime scene. Upon arrival, they found an adult male and female inside the crashed car, both clearly dead for several hours. What the detectives next would discover would be a maze of twisted secrets hidden around the crime scene. Their bodies were purposefully positioned. The male was stuffed in the front, his face touching the floor and feet in the air, while the female was crammed in the back seat. This wasn't an ordinary accident. It was far more twisted than detectives could ever imagine. As the authorities removed the bodies from the vehicle, it was evident that both the victims had been fatally shot. There were no bullet casings, no mobile phones, nothing. Autopsy reports confirmed that they were already deceased before the crash occurred. It didn't take long for the authorities to discover that the deceased were Holly Williams, 33, and William Lanway, 36. As the autopsy reports came in, it showed that Lanway had sustained 2 head wounds, one near his temple on the right side, while Williams was shot in the head and the chest. The autopsy revealed that the chest wound didn't cause Holly's immediate death. She'd survived for a period before being shot in the head again. However, Lanway's wounds were fatal, taking his life instantly. Looking back into Holly's past, she had a challenging childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young, leading to a strained relationship with her mother. She moved in with her father and stepmother for a while, but eventually relocated to downtown Nashville to pursue her dreams. Holly became an esthetician, a skincare professional, and tried to stay connected with her 5 siblings despite her troubled relationship with her mother. She was especially close to her sister Emily, with whom she spent every holiday. William Lanway had an equally difficult upbringing. He was born on March 17, 1983 in Clarksville, Tennessee. Affectionately known as Bill, he was loved for his outgoing and energetic personality and was always the life of the party. However, he'd suffered significant emotional trauma. He lost his 4-year-old daughter Madison to brain cancer on September 21, 2011, and his previous girlfriend and Madison's mother, Dana Jones, had left him. This loss deeply affected him, but he continued to immerse himself in Nashville's nightlife and party scene. Holly and Bill met in 2018 at a music festival. They had an on-again, off-again relationship characterized by a series of breakups and reconciliations. Friends and relatives described their relationship as toxic, and Holly had even mentioned to her friends that she was afraid of Bill, fearing he might hurt her.
Holly's relationship with Bill was what I would say is toxic. I was very worried about her in the relationship. I know at times she wasn't happy, and she was also worried and scared.
So the detectives started examining Holly's and Bill's records, and they uncovered a lengthy history of domestic disputes, including a restraining order filed by Holly 9 days prior to the incident. This background cast suspicion surrounding their deaths. The detectives had come up with a theory. When Bill realized that Holly intended to end their relationship permanently, he may have persuaded her to join him in the car. Subsequently, he shot her before turning the gun on himself. As the car veered off the road and struck a tree, Bill was already deceased and Holly was dying in the back seat. This theory seemed quite plausible to Holly's friends and family, who were familiar with the troublesome nature of her relationship with Bill. Even Bill's acquaintances and relatives, who might have defended him under different circumstances, admitted to his recent behavior towards Holly. To them, it appeared entirely conceivable that he'd take such horrific acts. And so, the case appeared straightforward. Bill and Holly died in a murder-suicide, and the detectives were about to close the case. But there were a couple of pieces of evidence that didn't fit that narrative. These bits were about to reveal the dark, twisted mind behind Holly and Bill's death. A major flaw in the theory by the police was that it didn't make sense how the bodies were found in the car. Bill was on the passenger side and Holly was in the back seat. It seems strange that neither of them was in the driver's seat. Maybe the crash caused Bill to fly across the car, but it seemed highly unlikely. It seemed more plausible to think that someone else was driving. Another weird thing was that neither Bill nor Holly had their phones with them in the car. This was odd, especially since most people don't go anywhere without their phones. Maybe Bill left his phone at home on purpose to make it harder for anyone to track him. But why would Holly do the same, especially if she was worried about Bill? At this point, the case was about to take a dark turn. Regardless, the missing phone seemed like a small detail, but it hinted that something twisted might be going on. The fact that there was no gun found at the scene was also a big problem for the theory of Bill shooting Holly and then himself. If that were true, the gun should have been there in the car or near the crash site, but it wasn't. Without a gun, it was hard to believe that Bill did it. Maybe he got rid of the gun after the shooting, but then why wasn't it found nearby? Or even bullets? The car didn't look like it had been in a normal crash either. All these strange things made the detectives think that maybe someone had set up the scene to make it look like a murder-suicide. It seemed like someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make it look like something it wasn't. But there wasn't anyone obvious who could have done it. Bill and Holly didn't seem to have any enemies. However, Holly had security cameras at her home, which was meant to keep an eye on Bill, and these might have captured something important. So the detectives eagerly turned to these footages, hoping for clues, and what they found was deeply troubling. After the latest fight between Holly and Bill, some interesting things happened. First, after Bill left, Holly took some steps to protect herself. She'd gotten a new deadbolt installed on her door because she was afraid of Bill. Not long after, Bill tried to break into her apartment, and it was all caught on camera.
There's no way in the hell I'm leaving my apartment knowing that you can disable my lock. If there was any way I could just disable the lock, and because the door lock wasn't changed, he would come in and assault me.
He managed to get inside, but luckily, Holly wasn't at home at the time. But then, a group of other guys started showing up at Holly's door one after another. They were all asking for her by name, and they were all trying to hide their faces from the cameras. Then, on March 10th, 2020, 3 men came over. They were all dressed in black with their faces covered. They kept yelling Holly's name and saying they just wanted to talk. Holly was at home at that time, but she didn't trust them. She ran around until she found something called a safety bar to block the door and keep them out. Based on the way the men were behaving, especially with Holly and Bill dead, investigators found them to be extremely suspicious. But the problem was, the detectives couldn't figure out who they were because their faces were covered. They'd released some pictures to the public, hoping someone might recognize them, but they didn't get any useful information. So the detectives started looking into Holly's personal life, and soon things took a dramatic turn. They found out that she wasn't just working as an esthetician in Nashville. She had a double life. One, she wasn't really good at hiding from her friends and family. Along with her job as an esthetician, she was also working as an escort. She'd been doing it ever since she was 18 years old, and she was pretty open about it with her friends. She used the name Layla Love for her escort work. And it turned out that Holly had some very wealthy clients who paid her a lot of money, not just in cash, but also in expensive gifts like jewelry and vacations. She couldn't afford all the things she wanted with just her esthetician job, so she used escort work to make extra money. Looking into Holly's clients, detectives were able to find a couple of leads. One of the men who showed up at her door mentioned a specific client by name. Another client, saved in Holly's phone as Jimmy Green, sent her a lot of messages before her death. But when they looked up Jimmy Green's phone number, they found out it was connected to a messaging app called Pinger, which lets people use a fake number. They got some records from Pinger, but they still couldn't figure out who Jimmy Green really was. All they had was an email address associated with the Pinger account, but even that didn't give them much. The email address was jimmygreen34@gmail.com, but the name associated with it was Agent 47, which is a reference to a character from a video game called Hitman. It seemed like Jimmy Green was really good at covering his tracks, which made him look even more suspicious. So the police decided to take a different approach. Instead of trying to figure out if Jimmy Green had registered with his real name online, they looked into which IP address was connected to his cell phone number. Then they went to different cell phone companies to see if any of them could match the IP address to one of their customers. After a lot of searching, they finally found the phone that was associated with the IP address, and it belonged to a man named Adam Carey. Adding on to the discovery, it was found that Adam looked a lot like one of the men recorded by Holly's security camera, who had part of his face visible. It was a significant breakthrough in the case. Now, the detectives just needed to figure out why Adam might have wanted to hurt Holly. Adam had served in the Marines with a special ops team and then worked in private security after he was discharged. But he didn't have an easy time adjusting to civilian life. In 2016, he got in trouble for impersonating a police officer, and the police found a lot of weapons in his car, which was pretty alarming. But he only got a short prison sentence of 4 months. Adam seemed like someone who could have murdered Bill and Holly, but there was still the question of why. He didn't seem to have any connection to Holly. He lived in North Carolina at the time of the murders and not in Nashville, where Holly lived. And there was no record of him ever hiring her as an escort or even meeting her. But then the police looked closer at Adam's Pinger account. They found out he'd messaged someone else too. This person was named Brian Brockway, and he wanted to hire Adam for a job. It wasn't clear what the job was at first, but Brian had a lot in common with Adam. He was also a Marine who worked in private security based in Austin, Texas, with no immediate connection to Holly. But his life was intersected with hers in the most unexpected way. Now, Adam had sent Brian a file called Tennessee SITREP on March 9th, 2020. Basically, SITREP is short for Situational Report, which is a military term for a report with detailed information about a situation. Shockingly, in this case, it was all about Bill and Holly, their schedules, when they came and went from their house, and other specific details. Adam also shared this document with another man named Gilad Peled, or Gil for short. Gil had military experience too, serving with the Israeli Defense Forces and then working in private security in Southern California. But he'd lost his job and moved to Texas, hoping to start his own security company. So he put up the Austin-based private security firm Spear Tip Security Group. And unusually, he was soon hired by a car dealership called Charles Mond Toyota, which was owned by 48-year-old Eric Mond, to deal with their trespassing issues. He was desperate for some money, so he straightaway accepted it. Now, Holly had been texting with Adam, but nobody knew how they knew each other, and there didn't seem to be any apparent connection between them. The only thing the police could guess at this point was that Adam and Brian had been working in a secret job which involved keeping an eye on Holly and Bill. It was probable that Brian had hired Adam to hurt them, but there didn't seem to be any obvious connections between Brian and Holly and Bill. And both Brian and Adam were working with Gil, who worked for Eric Mond, the owner of the dealership. After a lot of digging, the police were finally able to connect Gil to Holly through Eric. It's a long chain of people, but it all came together in the end. Eric, the car dealer, knew Holly because he'd hired her as an escort several times. He used a fake name, Eric Moore, when he texted her in February 2020 to arrange a meeting in Nashville. But after that, he didn't reach out to Holly again. However, he did text with Bill, Holly's boyfriend. Now, it's not clear if Bill was involved in Holly's escort work or what he knew, but a month after Eric's trip to Nashville, Bill had hacked into Holly's escort account and found some information about her clients. Then he tried to blackmail Eric, threatening to expose him if he didn't pay up. Instead of paying, Eric reached out to his private security guard, Gil. At first, Eric just wanted Gil to find out who Holly really was, but Gil himself had reached out to some other people for help. His findings would lead to a chilling realization. Eventually, Adam had realized that Holly wasn't trying to extort money from Eric, but Bill was. It's not clear how he figured it out, but he untangled the whole complicated situation. So Adam decided to do something about it. He sent messages to both Bill and Holly on the Pinger app, and then he followed Bill to the grocery store. It's unclear if Bill knew he was being followed, but he called Eric, presumably to pressure him for money. Then Brian told Gil that he and Adam were authorized to kill both Bill and Holly if necessary. The day after that, on March 12, 2020, Holly and Bill were taken. So far, the details were murky, but the security cameras at Holly's apartment revealed the truth. The detectives were unprepared for the terrifying, gruesome scenes captured in the CCTV recordings. Holly and Bill left around 11:40 p.m. in this clip. After Holly and Bill left the frame of the security camera, it recorded the sound of a car starting, followed by multiple gunshots and the sound of a man and a woman yelling. Nobody in the apartment complex heard any of this. It was only captured by the security camera. The police came up with a new theory based on this footage. They speculated that Adam and Brian attacked the couple right after they left the apartment, shooting Bill intentionally because he was the one behind the blackmailing. Then, accidentally, they'd hit Holly in the chest. Realizing that they had 2 bodies to dispose of, they drove Holly's car to a dump site. Once there, they realized Holly was still alive, so they shot her once again, this time in the head. They left the car in drive mode, allowing it to roll into the woods. Gas station security footage showed Adam and Brian driving to Memphis, Tennessee after the murders. Adam dropped Brian off at the Memphis airport, and then Adam drove back to North Carolina. Strangely, after these events, Eric left an online review for Gill's security company, Speartip. He praised their professionalism and efficiency, which struck some as odd given the circumstances. The FBI discovered Eric had paid the 3 killers nearly $1 million combined. Despite the complex investigation, the police lacked direct evidence linking Eric to the murders. They needed a confession to prove the murders were premeditated and authorized by him. Rather than immediately interrogating the suspects, which could alert them and lead to potential flight, the police devised a plan involving Brian's brother, Chad Brockway. Chad, unaware of the murder plot's details, agreed to cooperate with the investigation and even went undercover to gather more information. Chad had contacted Adam and discussed another potential murder for hire. Adam was surprisingly open about the details and quoted a rate of $60,000 for the job. Chad then wore a wire to a meeting with Brian, hoping to gather more information. Brian eventually opened up, discussing Eric, Holly, and Bill in detail. He admitted to his involvement in the murders and even seemed proud of overpowering and killing Bill. He mentioned that Adam was the one who killed Holly and expressed admiration for Adam's willingness to shoot a woman.
Some of the problems that we ran into last time is we had to take them at the same time, dude. She wound up still breathing. And, he finished it in the back seat. And you got my respect. I totally got my respect for that. You know, a lot of guys with females, now you'll probably.
Brian, Adam, and Gil were all arrested on December 10th, 2021. The police coordinated the arrests to happen simultaneously to prevent any suspects from fleeing. However, they'd waited to arrest Eric because they still lacked any evidence to directly link him to the murders. The investigators were confident that the hired killers wouldn't take the fall for Eric, so they devised a plan to gather evidence against him. They persuaded Gil to dial Eric and demand more money, pretending that Adam wanted additional payment to keep quiet about the hit.
We got a problem with one of the shooters in Nashville. He found out that you were the client that paid for this, for the job.
Mm-hmm. I'll pay the guy $25,000, but I think it needs to go away after that.
So we need to take care of him?
He did a solid for me, and I appreciate it for that. But I just want to make sure it's, in 6 months down the road, he's not going to pop back up. Honestly, I think I'd rather take care of it permanently, and then I'll just run 150 through Speartip, like we did last time.
Eric's response incriminated him, confirming to the police that he had indeed ordered the murders. Eric was arrested during a hunting trip the very next day after the call. During the trial, federal prosecutors wanted the jury to see home surveillance footage showing Carrie right outside Holly's door. FBI Special Agent David Somm testified about the undercover sting operations he designed, which ultimately cracked the case. He believed this was the only way to truly understand what happened in Nashville.
I took the big duties of fighter, man. Caught my hand in the door. When he did, it bent the entire frame of the door.
On the undercover audio tape, Brian was almost bragging to the undercover informant. He boasted about taking down a big guy, making it sound like he was creating his own business line and running his own company. From the wiretap, it seemed he was trying to build a reputation, likely exaggerating. This tape was supported by much of the evidence found in the case. The prosecution's star witness, Gil, was crucial. Despite being a liar and profiteer, he knew he'd done wrong and wanted to tell the truth to the jury. He testified that he got involved because he needed money, with the security business suffering due to COVID, and he had a family to support. Perhaps the most impactful part of the prosecution's case was when they played footage of Bill and Holly being shot. The courtroom fell silent as everyone watched the horrifying video. It was rare to have audio from an actual kidnapping and murder. Prosecutors also played another key piece of audio evidence, an undercover tape of Brian Brockway discussing Holly's killing. The recording confirmed that Holly was alive and terrified when they reached the dump site. Brockway said Adam was the one who shot Holly to death, earning his respect for finishing the job.
Some of the problems that we ran into last time is we had to take him at the same time, dude. She wound up still breathing. And he finished it in the back seat. And he got my respect. I totally got my respect for that. You know, a lot of guys with females, yeah, you'll probably.
Next, the prosecutors planned to show Eric Mon's reaction to the chilling shots and screams during his interrogation with FBI Special Agent David Somm, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. The defense, however, tried to discredit Gil Peled, claiming he lied to save himself and received a favorable sentencing deal for his testimony. They agreed that Gil couldn't be trusted, highlighting his deceit about being a former Israeli intelligence agent and initially downplaying his role in the murder-for-hire plot. Chad Brockway, Brian's brother, testified that Gil had lied to him from the start, saying the case involved a client whose daughter was a victim of sex trafficking. This wasn't the case, as revealed by the indictment. The defense also tried to suggest other explanations for the murders, including implicating Holly's clients. They aimed to cast doubt on Eric Mon's involvement, pointing out that the lack of a clear admission of guilt in the undercover call. In their closing arguments, the defense emphasized that star witness Gil benefited the most, receiving $905,000. Despite their efforts, the prosecution's evidence was strong. Given the severity of their crimes, all three criminals are facing mandatory life sentences and will have separate hearings later in 2024. Attorneys for Adam and Brian had declined to comment, while Eric's legal team intended to seek an appeal on the verdict. Detective Cuthbertson expressed relief that investigators were able to bring the perpetrators to justice. However, he also acknowledged that there was still no way to fill the void left by the murders. Before we end this video, we want to express our heartfelt condolences to Holly and Bill's families and loved ones. Both Holly and William's families didn't deserve this tragedy and this trauma of having their loved ones being killed the way they were killed. Bill was a guy that tried to push through everything. Throughout his entire life, he was met with tragedy after tragedy. If you take Bill's close circle, it was always filled with laughter and life.
I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, and known Bill since he was probably 6 or 7 years old. Went to elementary, middle, and high school together. He's always been a staple of Nashville since I can remember.
Living here, people go down to Broadway, Midtown, Gulch area, and Bill was always out in that scene too, and he loved it.
Meanwhile, Holly was a victim of circumstance. The evidence presented at the trial indicated that Holly didn't know anything about the extortion plan. Many people see Holly Williams as a woman who was repeatedly victimized and ultimately met a tragic end. Do you think Bill was managing Holly's finances and used that information to blackmail someone? Or did he hack into her phone without her knowledge, uncovering secrets that led to their demise? What do you think the truth really is here? We'd love to hear from you. Your insights help us to choose the most compelling stories. Stay tuned for more intriguing mysteries. Feel free to share your opinions. We'd love to hear from you. Also, subscribe to the Mysterious 7 to uncover more cases like these from around the world. Until next time, stay safe. Shout out to these incredible true crime lovers. Your support truly keeps us going. To the rest of the Mysterious 7 family, if you want to get in on the action and get a shout out, join our Crime Police membership today.